Hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. I'm still very congested. My illness has gone away for the most part. I definitely don't feel like I'm gonna pass out every single time I stand up, so that is a definite plus. I was really on the fence about recording while I still sound like this because I'm sure it sounds nasty, but I was just so excited about the book that I wanted to talk about for this week that I decided that I had to power through because while I was away on vacation, I heard on the grapevine that we were getting another Netflix book adaptation. And this book is one that I heard about when I was like on YouTube back in the day. I just remember everyone and anyone talking about this book. It was the book of the decade. So without further ado, we will be talking about Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. As I already mentioned, this book is getting adapted into a Netflix movie. At first I thought it was a TV show, but it is a movie. It's coming out the 13th of September, which should be a Friday. So the cast for Uglies is already looking very spectacular, immaculate, with Joey King as our main character. I was gagging so hard when I saw the trailer because Laverne Cox is, what is her name? I just read the book. Like literally this morning I finished it. Dr. Cable. Yes, that is her name. I was eating that shit up. Oh my God. I thought that was like the best decision they could have made in terms of casting, and I know nothing. Books is my forte. Television movies, not my forte. But I was really excited to see David in the trailer. I thought his actor looked immaculate as well. And overall, I feel like we're gonna eat. I feel like this is going to be a reset for the culture. For now, I wanted to make this video as a bit of a refresher for all the people that are excited to see the movie or want to see the movie without having read the book yet, and to just get reintroduced to everything we're going to see in that movie. Again, hypothetically, potentially, I don't know what changes they've made. The movie has not come out yet, so we'll get to that. So to start with a spoiler-free summary, Uglies is a young adult dystopian novel. I know, like creme de la creme a la Edgar of genres for young adult. It's a YA dystopian. So in this society, everyone is considered an ugly. So these are your like regular degular people just, living in society. And then once everyone turns 16, they get a procedure that turns them into pretties. Our main character is Tally Youngblood. She is about to turn 16 when the book starts off. Her best friend Paris has already turned pretty, and at the start of the book she's feeling very lonely because again her only friend is now a pretty. He doesn't live with her anymore. In this city they're separated, so it's Uglyville, literally Uglyville, and New Pretty Town, with other, suburbs and divides in the city based on what level of pretty you are. A lot of like world building, but essentially new pretties are the people that have just turned, and then there's middle pretties. Those are like, more, 30 to 40 range. And then you have old pretties, late pretties, that's what they're called. I'm sorry. And the reason they're also separated into those three categories is because they do additional surgeries once you reach a certain age to essentially keep up with the plastic surgery of it all. Because with real world applications of plastic surgery, we know that like, especially with things like Botox, it shifts in your face. So it's not like a one and done. You have to constantly be like readjusting or like getting supplemental surgeries on top of that to maintain a certain look. But anyway, that's too technical. We're in a fantasy novel. Tally meets this girl, Shay, who is also recently left behind by her friends that have turned pretty. So Shay is kind of like a rebellious person in the story because when she meets Tally, she kind of has like opposing ideals compared to what Tally has for the surgery. Shay is the first person that Tally meets that is kind of like, well, what does that really mean? Like, what do they mean by turn us pretty? Why can't we be pretty as we are? Why do we need the surgery? Is there another option besides getting the surgery? I'll go into it more later, but what I really like about how they build up Tally's character, you can tell just by reading it that she has never once questioned the world that she's lived in. She's never questioned the rules, the ideals, or the structure of their entire society. We're getting this book from her perspective. So when she's hearing Shay talk about like these wild ideas about, staying ugly, for her it's so like inconceivable. She can't even begin to imagine why Shay has this perspective. It's so well written in the sense that like you don't even question for a moment that she has really like 100% faith in what she's been taught. This girl has been like so successfully brainwashed since childhood, and you can tell just by the way she talks about Shay and to Shay about the whole procedure. She like can't even comprehend that what she's saying is bad. That's the entire vibe of this book, and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done. Anyway, back to the summary. So a few days before they are set to get their procedures, Shay ends up running away to a place that she calls the Smoke. Up to this point, Shay has been telling Tally all about this magical place where Uglies run away to, and they never get the procedure. It's not a city, it's not run by like a government in any way. It's truly just a place where Uglies can stay ugly. So Shay asks Tally if she wants to come with, but Tally is very opposed to the idea, and she wants to get her surgery. She wants her plastic surgery. So she decides that she is not going to go with Shay. Shay leaves without Tally, but she does leave her a note with directions on how to get to the Smoke in case she changes her mind. So the next day, when Tally is set to get her surgery, she is stopped before she can see the doctor and taken by the special forces known as Special Circumstances. There, she meets Dr. Cable. So Dr. Cable is withholding the procedure from Tally and refusing to turn her pretty until she tells her everything she needs to know about the Smoke. At this point, Tally is like, this is a made-up place. This is not a real place. Give me my Botox. But Dr. Cable is not satisfied with the information Tally gave them, and eventually Tally agrees that she will use Shay's directions to find the Smoke, reveal the location to Dr. Cable in exchange for her getting her procedure. So the story continues with Tally going to find the Smoke, going to find Shay, and meeting all the people that have run away there, and her having to make a decision about whether or not she will reveal the Smoke to Dr. Cable. And you know, along the way, there's the good old romance, tension, suspense, having to come face to face with your own ideals and what you've been taught and whether that's right or wrong. All very YA dystopian vibes, all perfect and well. So that's the spoiler-free summary. If you don't want to know what happens in Uglies and you want to wait until the movie comes out, I suggest you click off the video because I will be going into everything, including what I liked about it, what I might have disliked, and overall just the plot of what happens in the story. If you don't care and you want to know before getting into the movie, please feel free to continue. So with that out of the way, let's get into the video. I want to preface first by saying, of course, with a title like this and with words like uglies and pretties, there is a very heavy emphasis on beauty standards. But what I thought was very interesting about the way that they talk about it is that they say it from an almost biological, objective, scientific perspective. When they're talking about what is the difference between an ugly versus a pretty, it's not subjective. They are saying it as if it is matter of fact, which personally, I have yet to read the other books that are in this series, and I hope that they explore it a little bit more. But initially when I was reading it, I was definitely getting the vibe of like genetic superiority. I can see like a very heavy theme of eugenics, that being that they are turning the uglies into what is biologically the best of the human race. And it is very, very subtle the way that they go about it throughout the book. And I really wish and I hope that throughout the rest of the series that they explore that a little bit more, because when they talk about it in this first book, they're talking about these facial features and what they do to the pretties as almost like strategic to make other people see them as like someone that should be protected. You look at this person and they are so objectively pretty that you have an innate like sense that you need to protect them or that you cannot cause harm to them or that you shouldn't. But the basis of that thinking is that there are features that they can give to someone that'll elicit that response. That there are certain features of a person that are desirable. So I can see like that we're like teetering just a bit into eugenics, because that same like mentality of like that certain features are superior is the basis of so many other like crucial events in our history. I mean, if you even think about, you know, in the days of slavery, people were trying to prove scientifically that Black people had smaller brains than white people, and that was why it was okay for white people to enslave them, that they were genetically superior to Black people. And the same thing happened during the Holocaust, where they are demonizing certain features attributed to Jewish people. It's the exact same mentality that is taking place in this book. And I can see like the start of something so great. And again, I have not read the rest of the series, but I will. And if I read that entire series and they don't get into this at all, I will be pissed. I will be so genuinely mad, because at the end of the day, Dystopian is meant to be a critique on our society. And there are other critiques of society in this book, being like identity, obviously beauty standards, you know, very surface level. But I see something like deeper in this story, and I would hate to see that potential wasted. I'm talking about this book as if it's currently coming out and like the books have not come out yet. Uglies was published in 2006. Let me know in the comments if I'm going to be disappointed when I finish this series. I could be grasping at straws right now. And if you read the book, you'll see. Like there is this sense of like biology, like the objective scientific nature of what makes a pretty. I feel like that one meme of the guy where it's like, it's all coming together. And I feel like people might make fun of me for this. Like, either way, until I read the rest of the series, I'm in denial. This is the theme of the book. Fight me. So obviously with a book like this with the title of Uglies, it does deal a lot with this idea of identity and beauty standards. What I thought was really interesting is that there's a part in this book, I think like after Tally is starting to have these revelations about her society and what she's been taught, specifically about how her and the other Uglies have nicknames for each other. And reading this from an outside perspective, obviously I'm not in the society, having people like have these nicknames for each other based on like quote unquote what makes them ugly. Like for Tally, they call her Squinty, like squinty eyes. In this day and age, someone might see that as a little problematic. Anyway, oh, they call Shay Skinny. Paris was like Big Nose or something like that. But all the Uglies have these kinds of nicknames for each other, and when they say it, it's not seen as like being mean, because everyone's ugly. And they don't see it as being mean because they're like, well, that will change after the procedure. I'm not being mean to you. This is just like, we are ugly. That is a fact. But as we see with Tally's transition, what she is starting to realize is that people can be beautiful even though she's been taught that they are ugly without this procedure. And what I also found really interesting about it is because at one point she has like this like cognitive dissonance almost, or like she's thinking more about it, and she was like, well, we didn't see it as mean because we all call each other nicknames. That way no one person is singled out for being ugly. We are all ugly and we share this same experience, but we all know that it'll change eventually. So she has that moment where she's like, but what if it doesn't? Because if they never get the procedure, then that name, that thing that makes them ugly, will make them ugly forever. Which I thought was really great commentary about just like the general vibe of like, for example, going through puberty. I don't know if I can necessarily speak on like everyone's experiences, but I know like my experience as like a young adult going through puberty, going through these transitions, I thought to myself that like at some point, like once I hit puberty or once I hit a certain age or once I hit a certain milestone or a certain point in my life, that something about me will change. That this thing that I hate about myself will not be constant. The idea that there's something about you, something that you don't like, that you cannot change, or that will never go away, is scary, and it can feel very like overwhelming. When I was younger, I used to have very, very bad acne. I was like riddled with acne all over my face, but it happened to me when I was really young. My mentality as I got older was like, that will change, that my acne will go away. Once I become an adult, I won't get pimples. Adults don't get pimples. Look at this. I got a pimple patch right here. And I'm in a day and age where they can be cute. There were no pimple patches when I was growing up. But yeah, I do feel like throughout this book, the way that they talk about the uglies versus the pretties, there is a sense of understanding of the audience, the innermost fears and doubts that adolescents have. What I really liked about this part also is that Tally essentially asks herself like, okay, what if this part of me that I think is the worst part of me never changes? What is the worst possible scenario that will happen if I quote unquote stay ugly? I think it's a greater examination about the weights that we put into appearances and beauty, because Tally stayed ugly. Tally did not get the procedure. She went to the smoke, she met all these people, and you know what? She stayed ugly and she made friends, and she found a smoking hot leader of a mysterious organization to fall in love with her. She had adventure, she had autonomy, identity. She found all of those things despite being ugly, quote unquote. Right now I'm talking very surface level, but what we find out in this book is that this procedure is not just Botox and liposuction. So let me get back on track. So for the plot of this story, I know I went like right into the deep end. I'm like, let's talk about the innermost themes. So when Tally gets to the smoke, at first she's like dead set. She's like, oh man, I'm gonna have to break up their little summer camp, but oh well, I need my procedure. She doesn't see the weight and the importance of having the smoke. She doesn't understand necessarily what she would be doing if she exposes the smoke. So right before she can, Shay walks in and she stops. She has this little pendant that is like a tracker, and if she sets it off, the special circumstances will come and they'll take everyone away. So Shay stops her before she can set off the tracker. She doesn't really get a good time to set it off after that. So what she ends up doing is kind of like getting into her own role in the smoke. She takes part in like the labor that they do. They like chop down trees, get metal from these abandoned railroads. So Tally spends her time at the smoke and eventually gets into a rhythm. She is like still on the fence about whether or not she wants to set off her little pendant. Eventually she starts getting closer with David. That is the person that kind of like runs the smoke. He's not the boss, but he's the person that is recruiting the uglies, bringing them to the smoke, all that good stuff. Eventually, as time goes on, people start to suspect Tally because they're like, you are kind of weird. And I really like it because, again, one of the praises I will give to this book is that the plot is airtight. Like nothing is getting in like the cracks. There's no holes. Everything is very concise, and my battery is dead. The reason that people start to suspect Tally is because she has been lying to them since the get-go. But when people catch her in the lies, it's very like logic based, and where you're like, oh, this is good. Like you can tell this was like very well thought out. So the first one is that Tally ended up leaving 4 days after she was supposed to get the operation, but she told everyone that she left the night of the operation, like right before she was supposed to get it. So Dr. Cable essentially gave her like this pack of like, okay, this is your survival gear, and she gave her a certain number of meals to get her through her journey. Those meals Tally then used, of course she ate along the way, but then she used as like currency to trade for some stuff in the smoke. This dude, his name is Croy, think like LaCroix, but Croy, he was asking her about like, oh, how much was this sweater that you bought? How much were these new shoes? And she was like answering very chill, and he was so slick about it. And then he was like, based on that math, you're a fucking liar. So she was like, oh, I must have miscounted how many I had when I left. My bad. Oops. These kind of like catches and like little slip ups that she does are littered throughout the whole plot, and they're so good, and I eat them up. It's very well crafted. You can tell like there's no holes in that. Like that logic of people catching her in the lies and her lying lines up so well. Even when she is making these lies to people, you can tell like how well crafted they are because they're rooted in some base of truth. She's making the lies really well, but then people are still catching her, and it's so good, and it's so like the drama. That was definitely like a major contributor to why I like the book and why I kept reading it. So one night she is with David, and David takes her to meet his parents. We find out a little bit earlier in the book when he tells her that his parents used to be pretties. They were doctors in their city, but they left the city and did something to themselves so that they would turn ugly. He takes Tally to meet his parents and talk to them, where she finds out that they were these very important doctors. They used to do the procedure, and they were trying to do research to find out how to make the procedure safer, because with any surgical procedure there is a risk of, failure, mortality rates, things like that. I've been watching Grey's Anatomy. I know these things. While they were doing research, they realized that all these pretties had lesions on their brain, and they were in the exact same spot for every single pretty. The only people that didn't have it were doctors, government people, and firefighters. And what they figured out was that these lesions impair your brain in some way. The reason that the doctors and these important people don't have it is because they need to make important decisions on the fly. So the implication is that these lesions are impairing your ability to make rational decisions. And they figured out that it comes with every single procedure. Every single person that turns pretty will have these lesions, but it can be reversed. So once they figured this out, they decided to leave their city, create the smoke. They had David, and they decided to build their little mini society. So Tally finds this out, and her whole worldview shifts. She's like, oh, they're not just turning us pretty because they're nice and they don't want us to have these quote unquote features that make us ugly forever. Really, they're doing it for control. Because the whole reason, supposedly, that they made this procedure is because they were like, oh, well, we as a society figured out that if everyone was pretty, then there'd be no war. That we would not be jealous of each other and we would not be in constant battle if we just all had what we want, which is to be pretty. When you hear it, at the beginning of the book, sounds ridiculous, and it's done purposefully because it is ridiculous, because that's not the real reason. The real reason that they do this procedure and the reason it's successful is because they literally can't argue with each other. The procedure makes them less argumentative and less combative. They just go with the flow. They party all the time. They do what they have to do. It's all vibes. That's why it's successful. So when Tally figures this out, everything clicks into her mind and she's like, I'm not telling Dr. Cable where the smoke is. And she throws her pendant into a fire. End of story. But then special circumstances shows up the next day. And that is because unknowingly, when Tally destroyed the pendant, it still set off the same trigger and alerted Dr. Cable and special circumstances where the smoke was. So they end up capturing everyone along with Tally. Shay is immediately very angry and she's like, I knew it. I knew you were not here because you missed me. Shay clocks her immediately that she had alerted special circumstances to their location, and Tally initially it looks like she's kind of shifting to the dark side, but then she manages to escape special circumstances and reunites with David. So together they decide that they're going to go back to the city and free all of the Smokies, that's what they call them, the Smokies, from the clutches of Dr. Cable and special circumstances. So they travel back to the city. They manage to recruit some uglies to help them break into special circumstances, and when they do, they find Dr. Cable and Shay, who has now had the procedure and is pretty. I know, I was gagged. And immediately you see the shift in Shay when she is presented post-pretty. She's down to cause havoc with them. She's like, oh yeah, like this is cool, this is fun. And even when they kidnap her and take her with all the other freed Smokies and leave the city, they hide in a refuge in an abandoned rusty city. Shay is very agreeable with them and never tries to escape. She's kind of like, you guys are crazy if you don't want the procedure, but she's not like actively fighting them in any way. And she's advocating for all of them to get the procedure. Along with the other Smokies, David's parents are also captured, but we find out that David's dad, Az, was murdered. So Maddie, David's mom, is the only person that is still alive. While she was in captivity, she essentially discovered a way to reverse the lesions that are on people's brains after they have the procedure. So while they're in hiding, Maddie is working on this cure, right? She eventually develops it, and they try to give it to Shay, but Shay refuses to take the medicine. And they have this whole thing where Maddie is like, back in the day, doctors used to take the Hippocratic Oath. They used to swear that they would do no harm and they would not administer care against someone's will. She's like, we can't give these pills to Shay because she obviously doesn't want them, even though we know that the only reason she's refusing is because she has the lesions, and even though we have every way to cure her, we are not going to do it unless she consents. At this point, Tally is really struggling internally. She feels a lot of guilt because David's dad obviously died because of her, because she unknowingly alerted special circumstances to the location of the smoke. She told them all this information at the very beginning. She agreed to work with Dr. Cable, and essentially everything that Tally has done up to this point has indirectly led to the current situation they find themselves. She wants to redeem herself, and she decides that the only way for her to do that is for her to become pretty and take the medicine to reverse the lesions. Right now, the idea is that if they can confirm that this medicine works, then they can, find a way to get it to all the other pretties and free everyone from the lesions that the people are giving to them so that they're more agreeable. So the whole point is to let people know what the procedure really does and help the people that have already turned pretty. So Tally writes letters to herself so that she can essentially remember that she already gave her consent, and she told Maddie, aka David's mom, I'm giving you express consent. Even if I say no after the procedure, you have my consent. Do it anyway. Maddie also found out that Tally was the one that told Special Circumstances about where they are. So she was mad, but she was like, yep, my husband died. This feels like a pretty appropriate price to pay. David is super against it at first, but she doesn't let him convince her to not go through with it. And the book ends with her and Shay going back to Uglyville, and she tells the people to turn her pretty. I don't know if the movie is going to go more into the plot of some of the other books. I don't think so. I think they might try and stretch it out for one movie per book, which I would very much appreciate if they did. Just from reading this first book, I feel like they're so densely packed and there's so much to go into that they couldn't possibly cover more than that in one movie. I'm really excited to see how this book translates to an on-screen experience. In a book, it's one thing to say that this procedure turns someone pretty, and to have that prettiness be hypothetical and very imaginative. And it's another thing to see it on screen, because then me as a viewer, I would be questioning, well, what do you as the director, as the people a part of this project, view as pretty? What are you doing to these actors to make them and separate them from the uglies? So I think they have a little bit of a more delicate situation that they have to deal with when making this an on-screen experience, because I think a lot of the charm of the book is that it's very hypothetical. It depends on the individual reader's experience and relies on your own preconceived notions of what makes an ugly ugly versus a pretty. It'll be a hit or miss for sure, I think, especially when dealing with such a delicate topic about identity, beauty standards, and the way people see themselves. It's a very difficult scenario. I think the idea of beauty standards and what makes ugly versus pretty is very surface level to what the book and the story is about. I do think it plays an important role, but there's something so much deeper to the overall story, that being these themes of identity. Conformity is also a really big one. All these people, yes, they turn pretty after this procedure, but the thing that makes them pretty is the same for each person. They're all pretty, but in the exact same way. There is no individuality. And even when those people have kids, they don't look like their kids. So that is also a theme, although I don't necessarily always like to talk about the theme of conformity, because I always feel like that's a theme in dystopia where it's oh my god, everyone's the same. Just say you're from the US and that anti-communist rhetoric has been distilled in you since the age of in utero. I feel like conformity is always the go-to for dystopia, so I'm just boring. I don't know. Ooh, everyone's houses look the same. Look at a suburban neighborhood. They already look the same. We are already in dystopia because conformity is everywhere. Sorry, that was a tangent. I have a really strong feelings about conformity, I guess. Anyway, overall, I have very high hopes for this movie and I will be watching it. I'm not sure quite yet if I'm going to be reviewing it on the channel. I do want to, but if you guys want to see that, please let me know. It's a little hard for me to try and rate this book because reading it, finishing it, I can tell that it's meant for a series. A lot of other books that I've read that are a series, you can read the first book and still feel like the story is complete. Reading the first book in this story, I'm it's not complete. There is still more that I need to find out, and I don't necessarily like that in a series. I like to be able to read the first book and feel like a whole story was told. Reading the second book and continuing the series should feel like, oh, I'm getting something added onto this. Something is developing from a story that is already good, a story that is already complete and told. And I mean that in the sense of the arc, right? There is a beginning, middle, and end. Not necessarily that the story is done, there's nothing else to say, but just that this arc is done. So I feel for this book, it's a little hard for me to rate it because I'm like, it's obviously not done. We have to find out what happens to Tally, and I'm interested to know what happens to her. It's hard to rate it because it feels like one piece in the whole puzzle. So to kind of judge it on just this book alone is a little hard for me. I'm gonna say a 5 out of 5. Is the language a little cringy? Absolutely. Was it written in 2006? Without a doubt. But overall, it was a very enjoyable read for me and very light. Like, just a nice book. Even if you have the audiobook of this, it's definitely something that you can have like playing while you do other things, and it's just like an enjoyable listening experience. Although, oh my god, the audiobook is so hilarious because you can tell that it was recorded in a different time, and the way that audiobooks are recorded now are so different. I was cackling, and this is nothing against the voice actress that did this audiobook, but she would be reading lines and it was like, no, Tally screamed. There is no like acting in the voice acting, if that makes sense. No inflection in her voice, no attempt at making an actual scream. Very monotone. I was cackling. It was really funny. Anyway, that's not the point. Yeah, it's a 5 out of 5 for me. I really enjoyed it. It's a very light read, very easy to consume. And I hope the movie is as well. I watched the trailer and I was already gagging. I was very much enjoying the effects, the way that the cityscape was, the characters, the actors, everything was really good. We will see how the movie holds up. That's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I am very sick. I've been fighting my demons trying to talk because I can't breathe. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have read Uglies, what you think about it, if you've heard of the movie coming out, or if you're planning on watching it, because I'm very excited because this felt like it came out of nowhere. I heard about it literally like last week and I was like, oh my god, I feel like this was something that all the millennials have been waiting for. I was expecting more noise. If you want to see more content from me outside of YouTube, you can follow me on my social media at Variations of Listen to Kristen on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. I am planning on doing a haul of everything I got on vacation and all the new books I got. That'll be coming later. I'm trying not to record too much while I sound like this because I'm sure it's not an enjoyable experience, so this is what I have so far. That's the end of the video. I hope you liked it. I have so much more to do. I don't know why this eyebrow doesn't go as high up. I'm talking about Uglies and now I'm like picking apart my own face. This is not good. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please let me know in the comments. I do like hearing from you guys. Leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, but you know, it's forgivable if you just hit subscribe right now. I'm done. That's all I have to say. I'm pretty sure.